The final shape is here, Destiny 2's latest expansion, bringing a bittersweet beginning to the end of a decade-long adventure. A kind of remixed greatest hits album, it's both a psychedelic journey through the past and the first steps out into the future of a game that's been refined to the point where many of its systems barely resemble what we first played back in 2014. The question is the final shape everything we wanted to see? Billed as the end of the Light and Darkness saga, the Final Shapes campaign carries the entire weight of everything that's come before on its shoulders. So, no pressure, right? I won't recap the story so far though. In fact, if you need one, I did one you can watch here. Also, heads up, I'm going to do my best to avoid spoilers in this review, but it's impossible to talk about this campaign without some form of spoiler. Things pick up where last season ended. The Witness, the smoky-headed combined consciousness of an entire species turned interstellar stalker, is inside the Traveler, the giant orb it's been stalking that love-bombed its species and every species it's met since. And now the Witness is about to bring about their plan to enact the final shape, freezing the universe and everyone in it in one perfect moment. And finally, we've found a way to follow them in and try to stop them. So one of the longest standing questions in the Destiny universe, what is inside the Traveler, is answered right from the jump. And the answer is everything.
The inside is a composite of the outside. You're gonna see some things you recognize and some things you don't. Treat it all as real. Unless it ain't.
The Traveler seems to house a sort of amalgamation of reality, or a dreamlike reinterpretation of it. Walking out into the Traveler for the first time gave me the same kind of feeling that walking out onto Halo originally did. Bungie sure does love putting us inside large round structures. Weird they haven't let us play on your mum yet though. Sorry. Inside the Traveler is known as the Pale Heart. It's a lush, strange, alien and yet familiar place where you can almost smell the sunshine and taste the sweet air. A place where all you remember lives on, but it's being corrupted. And what follows is a wonderfully clever use of nostalgia. A literal trip down memory lane, with each area of the Traveler taking us back to a familiar but reinterpreted location from the history of Destiny. But it also gets weird, and I love it when Destiny gets weird. It's a very fitting and somewhat touching way to round out this journey, like playing through a giant montage that gave me plenty of feels and some surreal moments of deja vu. For longtime players, it feels like a real love letter to all that's come before. While that hook of battling for our memories against the forces corrupting them gave the story some nice emotional gravitas. Thankfully, we've made some friends over the years, and it was great to see quite a few moments where allies show up to fight alongside you, making the battlefields feel even more epic. The rest of the Vanguard leaders join us on the adventure too. Ikora, Zavala, and yes, even Cayde 6. And while the goal is a simple one, stop the Witness, the path to get there is anything but. Zavala and Cayde's storylines were particular highlights. Zavala's ramping up the stakes as he gets tempted by the promises of the Witness, while Cayde's return from the dead is played wonderfully, as both a joyous moment, a rare second chance at life, and as a giant emotional wound being ripped open again for everyone after they'd already grieved his loss.
I was gone, mourned, at peace, and now I'm here. Opening old wounds, filling them with salt.
It's definitely up there with the best of the campaign offerings Destiny has had. Speaking of Zavala, he's now voiced by Keith David following the loss of the great Lance Reddick. It was strange at first not hearing Reddick, but David does an excellent job, bringing the perfect energy to the role without ever falling into an impression.
If it is, it was an honor to serve the last city with you.
The campaign itself finishes on a sort of cliffhanger, but following the completion of the raid, a new true final mission unlocked for everyone, Destiny's first ever 12-player activity. This was a wonderful final battle, which I don't want to spoil too much of, but fighting with all those Guardians by my side, as well as all the allies we've made over the years, felt like a pitch-perfect way to finish the journey. I'm not afraid to admit it even made me a little bit teary-eyed, thinking back over all those years, all those adventures, all the raids, all the friends I've met along the way. If you've been a Destiny fan, I'm betting it hit you right in the feels too. Currently, I'm still plugging my way through the post-campaign endgame grind, and I won't get into all the various activities and bits and bobs you can sink your time into, it's all standard Destiny stuff. But I will say, there feels like there's a much broader variety of ways now to spend your time to chase those powerful endgame gear drops. The grind feels more open and rewarding than ever. And beyond that, the final shape brings with it some notably big and smart changes to the core of how Destiny plays. There's of course now the new final subclass, the Prismatic class, which lets you combine elements from all the other subclasses. It's wonderfully wild and feels very much like Bungie just saying, hey kids, go nuts. The build possibilities are truly huge. The Prismatic class does only have one super, grenade, aspect and melee option from each of the subclasses though, and of course has its own set of build altering fragments you can use. I mean, I say only, but that's still a lot more options than the other classes have. Still, the old subclasses will offer room for more specialized builds, and there's going to be plenty of times you'll still want to stick with them. Warlocks, Hunters and Titans now each get a whole new super too. Like the Song of Flame my Warlock got, which lets you fling out flaming bird grenades and deliver fiery snaps. I think once most people have unlocked all the prismatic powers, a lot of players will be running with it as their day-to-day subclass though. Partly because it also has a very handy mini super ability called Transcendence. As you dish out damage, you'll either feel a light or dark bar below your super meter based on what kind of damage you're dealing. And once both are filled, you can transcend. This gives you a health and damage boost, rapidly refills your grenade and melee energy, and gives you a special grenade. You also have to be transcended in order to deal damage to new bound enemies, which are glowy pink enemies immune to damage until you get a hit on them while transcended. Thankfully though, you don't have to be running as a prismatic class to deal with them, as anytime these guys show up, you'll find special pools of energy you can stand in that will charge up a one-off transcension no matter which class you are. Speaking of new enemies, the final shape brings a few new units for us to contend with, and not just remixed versions of existing units either. Sadly, one of them is my least favorite kind of enemy in a game, a flying one. Something about flying enemies just sucks. Maybe because they can hover over cover or they're trickier to shoot, I don't know. I hate them. These ones aren't too annoying to be honest, and they don't move around too much, but they're still flying jerks. There's also some new smaller grunts like Attendants, Weavers and Husks, and the new boss units, Subjugators and Omens, all of which are more than capable of using the powers of Strand and Stasis against you, and add a very welcome array of new faces to destroy. There's also been some pretty big shakeups with how power works. Destiny's power level has always been a way to gate off activities until you've managed to grind out the gear needed to get you leveled up enough to tackle that activity. But now Bungie has just disabled the entire system for campaign missions and certain lower level activities, which is great since you won't ever find yourself grinding for a piece of gear just to get leveled up enough for the next mission. And I think more importantly, it means they've been able to balance the campaign and those activities much more precisely, leading to a better difficulty curve and a fairer sense of challenge. Personally, I'm a sucker for the kind of punishment a hard Destiny mission throws at me, and I was absolutely in my happy place pushing through the extra hard legendary version of the campaign, knowing that if I was getting stomped, it was just because I needed to play better, not because I needed a bit more power. Another excellent change is to how fire teams handle power. Now you'll all be brought up to within 5 power levels of whoever has the highest power in the fire team. This is such a good change, as it means you can now always play with your friends, even in high level endgame content. You won't ever have one friend or be that friend who hasn't been able to spend the time on the grind, who feels bad for holding the team back or needing to be carried, which makes this a perfect time to actually recommend Destiny to new players too. It's also amazing to see that there's now finally a way to look for groups and matchmake with fire teams in the game, so you can do those tricky raids and dungeons without needing to A, have friends, and B, convince them to play with you. It's already been a lifesaver finishing off some quests for me. Of course, while this may be the end of the Light and Darkness saga, it seems like there's still plenty of Destiny left to come. Over the next 12 months, there's 3 episodes due, which are the new way Destiny does seasonal content. Each episode will be split into 3 acts, each with new story beats and content like activities, gear, and battle passes. So far, the first act of the first episode has just kicked off, with new acts dropping every 6 weeks. Obviously, it's too early to pass any judgment on it though, so we'll have to wait and see how the new episode structure and content plays out to know if it's a tangibly better system. We've also been teased with something called Codename Frontiers, which could be a whole new expansion, or maybe just more episodes, set to come for Destiny in 2025. So it certainly doesn't seem like this is the end of the road for Destiny by a long shot. Still, the final shape does feel like a satisfying conclusion, an appropriately emotional and rounded out moment where the Destiny story as we know it stuck its landing. The game itself also feels like it's had a decade of passionate players and developers pouring their time and love into it. There's a joyfully ridiculous toolbox of powers and guns, and more ways to play with your friends or by yourself, with a satisfying grind that's there, but only if you want to pursue it. It hasn't always been a smooth ride being a Destiny fan, but the final shape feels like a well-earned victory. Play.
It's time.